I'm really glad that we get to finally welcome the mysterious Nurul that me and Asrin, and I think you also, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of name dropped her a couple of times, and we said we really need to bring her for season 3. So Nurul is here from Perth. More on that later, as we also will end up talking about what the experience of is working remotely between two countries. But anyway, I think when me and Asrin were talking about what should be the theme episode for this season, we thought it would be really cool to hear from you, Nurul, about what is it that you do in people and process development, right? Where's this title from? So maybe we can start off with and Cam, you're not chopped liver in this conversation.
Why is it chopped liver?
Okay, so never mind. Too long story.
I'm here for the entertainment.
No, Cam. You have a valid role in this team, okay? More than entertainment. Okay, anyway. Okay, so listeners, all right. I'm going to get Nurul to share actually where her job title came from because, maybe Nurul, why don't you say more about what you do on this team and how did you even come about with this title?
So my role is in people and process development, and I think the gap I noticed was there was a challenge within the small team of the DEN team that we had, right, is without a very official HR person, given the setup of how QT size our team is, they were 10 max, right? How do we then take care of the human beings as well? And how do we support the flourishing of these human beings?
Yes. Yeah, and I want to pause you there because I want listeners, as you're listening to this, when you hear that Nurul was thinking all of these things when she was in I don't know whether you call it a middle management position or a ground position or whatever you want to call it. But this is her thinking from her individual perspective. This is not a system thinking on her behalf. Right? Okay, go on, Nurul.
Yeah, and I think as I notice more and more, and I don't know whether you call this conversation, but I had a couple of moments where I went and I said, I don't know whether you're paying me to do the work you're paying me, you actually hired me for. I feel like I'm doing a different type of work.
Yeah, because what were you doing that you felt this is not work?
I was having a lot of conversations with people.
Yeah.
And they were all centered around, this is what I'm stuck in. This is who I'm feeling stuck with.
Yeah.
This is the situation that we are going through within either with a client or within the team. And I just want to be able to do the work in an efficient and effective manner.
Yeah.
But this system or this way of working is not working out for me.
Yeah.
And I think it was in that aha moment that I was and having all the different conversations that I realized, actually, I'm just taking care of the people first.
Yeah.
And understanding where their stuck points are.
Yeah.
So that the work can move.
Yeah.
And the work can be done and the work can happen.
Yeah.
But it began with a people-based conversation first, from just holding space and just listening.
Yeah.
In the first place.
Yeah. So from a director position as the leader of the org, one of the things you're always wondering about, especially if it's a small organization and a small team, you're wondering what does professional development look like? I mean, what does career development for your people look like, right? So when Nurul came with this conversation about is this the work you hired me to do? And I'm just getting people unstuck and all that, right? And she's also wondering from a career development standpoint, so what's kind of what's next for me, right? And I liked the way that you articulated the work that you wanted to do. Because I asked you, if you could give yourself a title, what would be that title? What would be the best words that you would use to describe the work that you want to do? Yeah, so the people and process development phrases came from you.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I remember that. Yeah. So now since I'm hearing that you don't remember that, what does people and process development mean to you now? Maybe if you don't recall what it meant to you back then. And why did you put it together? Because it came together. It wasn't apart. It came together.
I put it together because I realized, I think, in the different conversations that I had, right? Or even when I think about the previous work experiences, the work cannot be done unless you take care of the human being. And that's why if you notice, even within my current title, right?
Yeah.
People comes first. It's not process, right? And I firmly believe that if you take care of the people, the work will take care of itself if you set up systems and processes that allow people to flourish.
Yeah.
And the work, right, to flourish. And I think coming into today, having done this work for a couple of years now and looking back, right, I really feel like you cannot have one without the other. If we take care of people too much, if we focus on the human being too much, eventually the human being will go, but I want to do more. I want to be developed. I want to learn different things. I want to explore this. So if the organization doesn't then set up the pathways, the possibilities that we can explore together for that individual person, people would leave, right? And that's why when we look at all the different articles about career progression, keeping your employees interested, and invested to continue the organization. What does career development pathways look like?
Yeah. I'm going to explain a bit about the context that I want the listener to hear this from. And then I'm going to segue it to Cam. So Cam, you have some time to stew a little bit. And Cam, I'm going to get you to stew a little bit on what has been your past experiences of either really great integration of people and process development from an employee standpoint, and maybe what has been not great when it's sort of too divided. Yeah, so you can stew on that for a while, because so for the listeners, I mean, I've no idea if you're listening to this from a large organization or a small organization perspective. I really want to speak to the small to medium sized organizations in particular, because I think there's a lot of us out there, and I don't know, we might be the majority of small medium enterprises out there, like teams of 8 or 10 and below kind of thing. So one of the issues that small to medium orgs struggle with is HR. What does human resource mean when every head count counts, right?
Yeah.
So in our team, we actually outsource human resource administrative work. Right. So that's given to an outside person to process letters and all sorts of things, right? Yeah. So in a small team, what we prioritize is the internal work that cannot be outsourced, which is human resource development. Okay, and I also want to say that I don't actually like the term human resource development. So that's why we call it people development, because I don't think any human being wants to be referred to as a resource. But okay, that's me and my soapbox. Okay, so so I'm hoping that whoever's listening, you can hear this also from our own team's perspective on how can we manage both together, the people and also the policy decisions that maybe you're not sure, do I need to be better educated? Do I need a HR degree to make these decisions? And I think there'll be some things that a professional should do, and there's some things that really every leader, manager and staff really needs to learn how to have better conversations with each other. Yeah, which is how can we first take care of the people, and then let's have a better conversation about the processes and policies that need to adjust or change along the way. Yeah. So I've set some context. Cam, you've had enough time to stew.
Yes.
What's coming up for you?
I think I agree with what Nurul say. It's taking care of the people, so then, and also having the processes in place. So then giving people the possibility so that they can move further. So in my experience, I would say that my experience previously and my experience now of what a our thing is completely different. So from what I had before, it's always a lot more of how to do the tasks, and the people were the neglected portion of the whole thing. So like, because there's always this thing, right? Someone else can and will replace you regardless of where you go. So it's really not about the person in the places that I've been before.
Yeah.
But more so of like, how well can you get these tasks done instead?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like in my experience here in CG, it's a different thing. So there was an interesting thing coming into this space and seeing that, oh, actually, I don't need to, like I mentioned previously in the previous episode, it's like, I didn't need to be a grey rock, essentially, I can, I can bring the full of myself into CG without separating myself from, okay, Cam as the person and then Cam as the task doer. Yeah. So it's always Cam as a task doer. I feel like more so of that. Not that my previous workplaces don't have the human component, but it was not the focus in that sense. It wasn't placed, the importance wasn't right there.
Yeah, I think that the word that's really jumping out from me from your sharing is the word replaceability. Yeah, so I'll caveat again, that one of my interests in having these team conversations is because in my 20 odd years of work, I've always worked for myself. So by default, I've always had the top experience. I've never actually had experience being an employee very much, right? So when I hear you use the word replaceable, it just sits with me that I would never want to work in an organization where I feel essentially it doesn't matter whether it's me or like Mr. A or Miss B. It's like they're just looking for a functional human being to like get the task done. And that doesn't feel very welcoming. Yeah. So I don't know. So that's what stuck out for me immediately from the sharing. Yeah. I don't know about you, Nurul.
I think, I agree with that. And I feel like that in itself is a challenge for a lot of organizations, right? How do you then, because the reality is the organization evolves around a central big piece of this is what we are created to do, or this is what we are founded upon to do.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to provide as a service or as a product and the purpose, right? And that would, in my sense, is given any organization, that will be the main key aims and objectives. And people are hired to ensure at the end of the day that job gets done, right? But what then is the question about not just prioritizing the work that needs to be completed, right? Or the goals that we need to achieve together as an organization. But how can we also prioritize our people to be able to achieve those goals together in a way where we feel empowered and engaged at the same time? And that to me has always been a curiosity because I agree. I personally don't want to wake up and go to work for the sake of going to work. Like it bears no purpose and meaning for me. I want to be able to connect to the things that I want to connect to at work, whether it's the people or the purpose of the organization and the day-to-day work that I do, right? And I don't know how organizations can balance that realistically when you're looking at big organizations. But I think what would be very interesting, given a beginning from a small setup. And I think leaning back to our previous conversations about small organizations are also made up of small teams, right? So if I took a step back and I looked at this as a small team, there are a group of individuals coming together to achieve a common purpose. How can we do that together rather than I'm just here to punch my 9 to 6 p.m. and be done with it?
I think a huge theme that organization and team and leadership development world is thinking of is what does it mean to have a more human organization? What does it mean to allow people to feel more wholly, authentically human at work because they believe that brings out the best kind of work? How would you define a much more human workplace, a human organization?
I think for me, it looks like, you know, the trapeze, the circus actors, they walk from one end to the other. That's the task. Right?
Okay.
The task is to walk.
The tightrope walker.
Yeah, the tightrope walker.
Okay.
The task is to walk from one end to the other. That's the task.
Right.
It's high risk. There's things involved. There are things to be done. That's the task.
Right.
At the end of the day, by the end of the show, you need to get the task done.
Right.
But a good organization is an organization that has a safety net underneath it. Yeah.
Wow, very nice.
So poetic. So poetic.
Yeah, so that's what it looks like to me. It's
I like that.
You know, I have
Rich
to walk
picture.
there. I have to get the task done. I have to get the performance going.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter whether or not I did well or not. Like, you know, it's I need to get the task done. I won't be egged down.
Yeah.
Right? There will be people in the audience making sure nobody throw eggs at me.
Yeah.
And also ensuring that when I fall, I don't die. Yeah.
Wow.
That would be a great organization for me in that sense. And that's what I feel I have experienced here.
Aw, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I don't know how I can. That was really nice. I feel like I want to lean on to that rather than bring in something different. I think when you shared that, Cam, I think what visually came up for me was there's a level of respect for what every single individual circus act could bring to that arena. And I think that's what is exciting about it, right? That there is an acknowledgement of the individual skill sets, personalities, abilities, and just sheer level of skilled teamwork. With the foundation of consistent practice. And I feel that's what it is. I feel that a human centered or like an organization that wants to take care of our people needs to look at what are the practices and the habits that we can do with each other and support that practice and that habit building with not just a safety net, but also like a trampoline effect.
Yeah.
So that even if you drop, you can bounce up again and then you can try again, you know, but there's also a level of assurance that it is okay to make a mistake.
Yeah.
It is okay to not do so well when you practice this time round. It is okay to figure out that you are not really in habit of doing it in a certain way that fulfills the organizational needs. But we are getting there and we're going to do it together. And I think that level of habit building practices is what would set organizations apart. And I think we try very hard to remind ourselves, let's practice what we preach.
Yeah. I love that you referenced that because I mean when I started Common Ground with my new team, I think it was important for me and for the team to be aware that I'm not coming into this as an expert in any way. Like I do consulting for larger organizations. I coach, I train, I facilitate. I have a whole bunch of like frames and theories and all that so that things make sense. But what is very important for me as a practitioner is that what I advise or what I consult comes from a place of integrity. That means like I can't teach leadership that I don't practice in my own space. I can't talk about team development without like looking at actually what works on a team development space. So what I find helps me do my work outside is to keep doing the work inside. Not so much as an expert, but as a person in a community of practice, experiencing it together with who I consider are a group of peers, not so much like, this is my middle, this is my ground, this is my head. Like that has to be recognized to some degree. But I think for a healthy human organization, there has to be an awareness that while there is a need for hierarchy to some level so that decisions can be made, everybody in the system needs to be fully aware that the hierarchy leveling does not say anything about your dignity and your worth and your voice as a human being in this system. Yeah, so that's important for me to I think it's important for me as a principle for healthy organization. So it's very much like the country, right? Like someone may be a prime minister and you may be a voter. And yes, the prime minister needs to do whatever a prime minister needs to do. That's the hierarchy. But I would certainly not be able to respect a prime minister or a big leader who thinks of me as like replaceable or not as an equal human being. Yeah. So we've talked like quite at length about like what does it mean to humanize an organization or to be human. And I did want a team conversation to always go down to, but what does it look like practically? Yeah, so I thought like in this 2-part series, we wanted to focus on like very particular practices that any organization listening would need to do. So for this session, we thought it'd be cool to kind of focus on the interview process, right? Because so Common Ground has been like debating about like whether we need to like bring on board like new people, and we a few months ago we decided like we really need to, and it was quite an interesting process of like deciding how to make that process of interviewing, selecting, bring on board like a bit more human, right? So Nurul has been the main process designer of that and making sure that people are looked after all along the way, from the internal oldies, that's us, to the potential newbies that we're about to integrate. Some newbies would not be able to make past a certain cut, and the newbies will get integrated. So it's actually remarkably more complex than it looks, right? So I'm going to stop myself there just to give that mic back to Nurul about, when you were charged by the organization, right? i.e. me.
Organization is who?
Yeah, actually organization is all of us, right? But when you were charged by like me, right, to say like, okay, we need to start the interview processes, we really should hire. Like from a process development standpoint, right? With that, I need to think of people first. What was your first port of call? What did you first choose to do? Yeah, to manage that, like designing that whole interview process better.
I think the first thing I had to do was have a conversation with the internal team.
Yes, say more.
It wasn't so much, by the way, we need to hire. But I think it was just recognizing that the team was on a certain workload in the first place, right? And we were very gung-ho and chonging, but at a certain stage we go, okay lah, cannot like that lah. We should be hiring.
Yeah.
And I think when trying to do that, I wanted to make sure that I was in awareness as much as possible of the reality on the ground, based on the roles that we wanted to hire for and the scope of work. So I remember scheduling individual conversations with the relevant team members.
Yeah.
So for example, Azrin. Hello, Azrin. You're sitting there on the couch.
Yes. Hi,
I'll randomly bring you into this conversation. So for example, with Azrin, to have a conversation about, okay, so now that we are in better understanding of your role, right? After we had our own conversation about your development and where you want to focus on, and we are thinking of bringing in this other person that's going to be looking also at strategic communications work.
Yeah, this other unknown stranger. This is like
akan
way
datang
early in the process.
Right? What would be the roles, duties, and responsibilities that you feel this person could support?
Yeah.
Depending on where we're at right now, right? And as we envision where we want to go.
Yeah.
So I repeated those conversations across the relevant pillars of work. I think organization will call them like departments. And and just even sat down. So Azrin was very patient with me because I did up the job description and I showed it to her, and then she looked at it and she was like, I think we need to write this slightly differently. So there was a almost curated and iterated process around it, even before the job posting went out.
Yes, this is like and like if you're listening, I think the first insight I would like you to get from this is you want to, even in a hiring process, you want to set up both sides to succeed. And by both sides, I mean the insiders to succeed and the potential outsider to come in. You want both sides to win in that sense. So before we even pay attention to the outsiders, the insiders cannot be neglected. Like, what is the insider experience of, you want to hire someone? Who is this potential someone in terms of what are they going to be doing? What are they going to be like? When are you going to bring them in? So I think sometimes organizations severely underestimate the need to have an internal conversation before you put in another bunch of people in. Because you see, if we think of it as, it's just a bunch of human resources, we need 10 human beings, therefore let's just hire 10 human beings, right? And there has to be some attention paid to the human experience, right? What is it like when, let's say, I have 20 people on my team and suddenly you hire 10 more? That's like, that's like a whole new 1/3 of human beings, and they are like changing up our atmosphere. And is that what I wanted? Is that what I needed? And if it is what I want and need, like, what else am I hoping the org will take care of as they go out and suss out who are the best new people to bring in?
Yeah. And I think I love what you're saying, because essentially you're bringing in what you just shared, right? Attention to how the I feels in the we and in the us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, say more. The listeners like, what that mean?
So I think to be able to make sure that as much as we are hiring in a new person, right?
Yeah.
The person who is already part of the organization is going to be like, so this person come in, do what? What is the need for this person to come in?
Yes.
Why is it important that we are hiring right now?
Yeah.
And then if they come in, what is the expectation for how we're going to work together with this new person? And then this is one person. And then you go and times how many, let's say 10 persons, right? Across maybe different departments, right? How do you then integrate, right? Because now there are different flavors. They come in with their own experiences, right? And things like that. So when you shared what you just did, there was a lot coming from the individual will have their own space and understanding or non-understanding about why the hiring is being done.
Yeah.
And I think the desire to have conversations, again, in context of the team size that we have, which I think is something that we have the privilege of, is for me to go down and say, to everyone that, would be working very closely with this team member or new team person, to go, what do you think if this is a job description? And I think to not assume it that I know best. Yeah. Just because I'm the one putting out the job ad and going through the recruitment process. Because the reality is I don't. Yeah. I can't talk about Azrin's work for Azrin. I can't talk about Alexa's work for Alexa. I can't talk about Hui Ying's work for Hui Ying, right? So it's really about having a deeper understanding about each individual work and putting together something that even on that onset, I know that my team members would not go, why you hire like that? This person is not relevant to the work that we are doing, or this person is overlapping in the duties and responsibilities. So what's the point? This is actually the gap that we have on the team, right? So what was very helpful in each of those conversations is that each of our team members shared back the gap they saw and what they were going to be excited about if this other person came in to support and complement the work so that we can do more and better.
Yes, and not just excited about, but also like concerned or fearful about.
Yes.
now you want to say more.
It's not just you lah.
Say more, Cam.
Everybody lah.
I'm part of the concern. I have concerns.
Yeah, but so from your experience as a member of the team, right? Like what did you experience in that part of the process that Nurul just described? Yeah.
I think I really appreciated the part where she had a conversation with each of us to understand what's it that she cannot see. So that made me feel like I'm part of the process right off the bat lah. So like I don't feel like this mystery person coming in, I don't know who they are. They're like not 100% shrouded in mystery. It's not like next day there's a new person in the room kind of thing. You know, which can happen in some organizations. It's like, I have a new teammate.
I have a new manager.
Or like, and that shock wasn't there lah. So to be part of that process actually makes my concerns a little bit more palatable, I guess, easier to digest lah. Before we even step into the whole interview process. Yeah, so that was very helpful. And then like, so that made me, I'm quite an anxious person. So that made me a little less anxious lah. And I think on top of that, I think it's also like having Nurul as my head of people and process development and having the interactions with her. There's that trust that like the person that both my very important leaders have chosen will not come in with, we're not take my opinions, we're not disregard where my concerns are at.
Yeah.
So that made my anxiety be a bit less. And it's not, and I feel like I matter lah. It's not like new person, all right, kind of thing. I need to go, kind of thing. So yeah, that was helpful for me.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of that process. Was that check-in of the insider experience. There was a little bit of an internal grieving process, maybe, of like because the team had is having a good team experience, and there was a bit of like concern, not just from Cam, but like oh no, like if we bring in someone new, what if it changes the dynamics? That the culture that we're enjoying. So there was a mini grieving or acknowledging process, right, of like what we are opening up ourselves to when someone new comes in. But like when that the end of that beginning was like, okay, so now we are in acceptance that we need to open up into a possible new team culture, then we can go into the middle of like, okay, the interview process, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna hand the mic back to like Nurul. Like so again, walk us through like the interview process that you could finally design for the new hires.
Okay, this one before lah. Just before the pre-interview process is you put out the job description, right?
Yes.
And then applicants need to apply, right?
Yes.
And they go to apply, and I remember, and I think I'll caveat here, I think the experiences that I've had over the years, I think what's interesting is I've seen very similar standard job application forms, right? You have your typical HR questions, your demographic questions, right? Emergency contact number lah, and all those stuff, right? Please put your resume in. Please fill in your working experiences. You got degree, no degree, diploma? Like what is it, right? And I think I've always struggled with the idea that would this application form really show all of who I am? Right? And I'm wondering, what does that application form look like? Right? And I think what supported me, and I think I want to give due recognition to the founding team at Common Ground. I think when they wanted to start off the form, I suspect they too had similar ways of how do we truly find the person, right? And allow them to show up as all of who they are. Right? So I think Shogo and Charmaine actually set up a lengthy type form, right? Asking different questions that centered around what do they care about in Singapore? What are the issues that they're concerned about? And I think what I did was to take a look at that form and then iterate it. And I think that's something that, so I've done that process twice now because we've done 2 rounds of hiring. The first round of hiring was Cam. It's me. And Alexa. And the second round of hiring, we just completed. And I think with each hire is the understanding that your application form cannot be static.
Yes.
It's a live document.
Yeah.
Right. And the live document also lends to where your organization is at in this current season and the future of work or focus that we are going into or we desire to be.
Yeah. And I want to really emphasize this point that, okay, first of all, I did not oversee any of the intake form that Nurul designed, right? I trust her. I left her alone to do it. And I knew there's something really special about the intake form that she had designed because it's the first time where I had a few direct messages online from people who I have no idea who these people are, right? But they're people who applied for the job and they said, thank you for that very deep and meaningful application form. I've never felt more rested or I've never felt more seen by the form. And they were actually seriously writing thank you for that because even if I don't get the job, I'm actually grateful I took that application form. And that made me think about how even something like that is a humanizing process because I can write an application form and feel really dehumanized by it, right? So what iterations did you put in that intake form that were you? I hear you on the credit you want to give the founding team, but what were some unique flavors that you felt I really want the user to experience this? Yeah.
I think one of a couple of the iterations were around tweaking the kind of questions that we're asking to do with the current landscape that we're in Singapore.
Yeah.
There was an iteration around the fact that we were in the pandemic or just post-pandemic, going to the endemic stage.
Yeah.
So I tweaked the question looking into how was the COVID period for them. Right?
Gotta say that's the first question, guys. That was the first question. And then I was I clicked and I was oh, wow. And I was it's a very long year I had. Where do I start? So that was that was a good question. That was a good pause. Yeah, and gave me time to reflect. So yeah, good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very...
Yeah, that was I think that was the first question on the intake form. Actually, how are you doing? You know, in basically that was the question of how are you doing?
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of people experience whoa, the form's asking me how am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about there's the pause, right? And I feel that because that also gives, because the form can be a form, or a form can be almost like a mirror of the way we are as an organization.
Yeah.
What we prioritize and the culture we want to build together. And that was what was important for me. And I think the iterations I did was to balance between wanting to respect, understand, and listen and see the individual while balancing that with what the organization needs at the end of the day. Which would see, for example, when I tweaked the form to say, what would be your strengths? And then there were categories of project management. So these are all our technical skill sets. And then what are your weaknesses? Right? And even down to asking them to give and sharing what is it that they felt they did well in previously, if they were to give a project as an example. And I think it was that almost like balancing act.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can lean too heavily on the individual, but then not take care of the organization without realizing it.
Yeah.
Or we can lean too heavily on the organization, but then lose out on the flavor that the individual can bring. So I think what I've been very, very grateful for and privileged actually is because I read through every single one, right? Is you actually see the individual flavor of what they've gone through, of what their experiences are. And you also see flavors of individuals who will respond in a way that feels safe for them.
Yeah.
So I have some that would do like one-liners, or some that would not complete certain questions. And I do respect that because it gives me an indication of where they are at in the current season that they're in. And I think because of the complexity of our work, we do appreciate a certain level of ability to pause and reflect on themselves first. Because that space that the individual is in will naturally translate into the space they would show up as when they become a team member. So that actually gives me a better understanding of the bat without even... So the caveat is we always remove any identifiers. Full names, mobile numbers, emails, even like preferred salary, resumes. So that's the last of things that we look at. It really is in the flavor of how they show up, even just within the form.
Yeah. So that was an intervention of like we're trying to minimize as far as possible, like whatever like biases, that we might have in the selection process, lah. Yeah. So Cam, if you could just share a little bit about from your own experience back then, as you're not in this organization yet, you're kind of hoping to apply. What do you recall of like from a user point of view?
So I recall sending in my resume, and then I recall receiving the link to fill it in, which is the form. And then when I clicked it, and the first sentence I saw was, "How was your year has been?" Because I got the post-pandemic one. And I was like, it's a really long year. Where do I start? And then I don't know what was it me at that point in time. I was like, with such a sincere question, right?
Yeah.
I went with my sincere response. It wasn't like I need to do well for this interview or whatever. Like, so it made me wanna respond as honestly as I can lah.
Yeah.
So then I clicked, and then I thought that was like the only question.
Yeah.
But there were more questions. Sorry, yeah. That's why I hear a lot. And I was like, oh, another one? Yeah. Okay, I thought I already bare my heart out for question 1. Let's go on to question 2. What is the cause that resonates, or 2 causes that really resonates with you, or something like that? And I was like, oh, there I go again. So then I did up that question. And I was like, wow, this is a really long process. By then I was already like 20-ish odd minutes into it, because I was like trying to write as much as is honest to what I've experienced. And then there is a third question. So it was really it was really long for me lah, the whole thing, for just the form itself. Yeah. Partly because also I wanted to be as honest as I can as I was answering those questions, and it really forced me to pause, because I don't often pause. I just go or like, okay, just move. So it forced me to really think about what I've experienced and what I've done well. Yeah, rather than just like skipping past and going forth, So that was a very refreshing experience for me. It was very different. It wasn't just I need to like paint myself up and look as nice as possible in a package and get myself chosen kind of thing. So it felt very real lah. It wasn't a I need to impress everybody before I step in the room kind of thing for me.
So I'm gonna bridge this over now to like the middle and end of this middle process, right? Which is the potential newbies are coming into the space and being interviewed, right? And that's also a new strange thing that we do, which is we do team interviews. Yeah, and we do like a 2-stage kind of like team interview. So Nurul, would you like to say more about why that was designed that way?
I think it was important for me that as so weird for me to say this, as leaders. Hashtag imposter syndrome episode 1, guys. I don't know which season. Can ask Azrin. It was important for me as somebody who was leading and heading the recruitment process that the team gets to also see the people who potentially could be joining the team, right? I had a side conversation with my husband to just like reflect on the entire process, right? And his question was, it's not really effective or efficient to do like so many team interviews, like at what point do you stop, right? Because it's not realistic. How do you, for example, scale this up to a larger organization? It doesn't really make sense, right? And I told him that it's either I get their buy-in when the person just saw us once during the interview process, or I have to fight the fire later.
Yeah.
And that's what I said. Because it's either I have the team sense for themselves, because they will come in as individuals.
Yes.
So you come in as yourself, you come in as yourself, and then Azri and Hui and so and so, right? And you will each look at it from a different lens and perspective. So that also takes care of the fact that between leadership, we don't have our own version of groupthink and what we think is best of. Because when I was thinking about this the other day, between Xiao and myself, we hold an understanding over the future we are working towards and the gaps that we see from our level of the work and our roles and our responsibilities. But from the middle and ground team, you all will see it from your perspective, right? And that's not something that we can speak on behalf of. It'll be highly inaccurate to do that way, right? And you'll not be in service of the larger team. So to have team members in the room is to ensure that when they hear and see how that individual shows up, they can go, oh, I'm about this person. Maybe out of 5, 6, I think let's look at this 3 again. So it's not so much for us to put our individual biasness right away, but we're supporting the blind spots. Because we each take care of different things within the organization.
So for listeners, if you are still wondering what was this 2-stage team interview, like the first interview, the candidates, as in not just the individual potential new candidate, but let's say the 3 or 4 selected potential candidates all come together in a group interview with our team. So it's this like big group kind of thing, which is odd for the newbies as well. They're like, why am I here with my competitors, quotation mark, right? And I think it was very important for us that they don't see each other as competitors, that they see each other as like, these are the human beings who are all showing up, hoping to explore this work. And I think the way you frame it, Nurul, is like the first session is just we want you to see this is the team you could potentially be joining. It's almost like a blind date, it's also to see whether you like us or not, you know, and not just about we like you, you know, and the advantage of having like a bunch of newbies is the bunch of newbies can also see how does this team that you think you might want to join treats everyone. Yeah, because if I were on the newbie side, I think I would look out for like, do they ignore certain people? Do they like certain people? Do they overfavor one or the other? Yeah, I know like Alexa said like, she was like judging us like, would you like that one? Because we do like that one and I don't want to join you guys.
We were all judging.
Yeah, but I thought that was an interesting first choice of the first stage is just getting to know you, blind date almost, like newbies like meet the team meet the newbies. We didn't talk about work at all.
No, we didn't. Yeah, I think that particular experience was for them to also in a way support safety for each other as candidates of the same position. Right? Because it'll be quite threatening if let's say it's one candidate versus like there's 5 of us, right? And you feel super off balance because then they feel they have to impress 5, you know, interviewers. And I think to just support that is the idea of let's do a group interview. And I think when I leveraged on previous experiences and previous sharing, right, it was also to support the safety of the candidate coming in, by also prior to them even coming in and giving them the details of the interview that we actually share the process they're going to go through.
So it's not like a shock, like, whoa, what is this?
Because it wouldn't be fair nor safe for the individual to be able to show up with their best possible self.
Yeah.
If we didn't pre-warn them and say, hey, by the way, this is stage 1. You're going to go through this, and then we're going to do this, and you're going to have time for this.
Yeah.
So to just lay it out, even at the, we would love for you to come meet us. This is how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what was also interesting and unusual about that team interview process is the power sharing that is given. So it's not just, let's say, me, the director, asking all the questions. Everyone on the team gets to ask whatever they want to ask. That's how we also prepped our internal people.
Yeah.
But we also let the candidates know that you can ask back. You can ask anyone from the team, from director to middle manager, ask them back and no holds barred.
Yeah.
And I think that the advantage I can see from a candidate's point of view is, I'm glad that person asked that question, which I would never have thought of asking, but now I feed off the response as well.
Yeah.
So in a way that does help equalize it a bit. Yeah. Well, as the person subject to the process once upon a time.
You want to say something?
Yeah.
I think what I remember and really like about the process was that in the group interview, we shared what our values are versus like what are the accomplishments that you have done kind of thing. You know, it's a more of who are you as a person showing up, which is like what the process was designed to do, rather than what are the other faces of me that is presented out into the world kind of thing that I can show me, like perform for me, you know. It's not a perform for me and show me how well we can do, come into this space, but more of like, what is your core?
Yes.
So that was a very interesting experience for me altogether, because I was, as I said, I'm a very anxious individual. I was very worried stepping into the interview process.
Yeah.
Because as I was like, what am I stepping into? Who are these people? What's the questions going to be asked? Do I need to perform? If I need to perform, what are the questions that will be asked? So like literally before I come into this interview, even after doing the type form, I was still anxious, right?
Yeah.
As always. So I went and had to read like 101 ways of like what are the interview questions and how to get myself sorted if those questions are being asked. So like I went deep dive into like the 101 ways to answer questions without looking like a fool. Like with all the web pages, they will have all these things, right?
Yeah.
So then I armed myself with all these, walk in and then like totally disarmed when I was like asked to read a page and choose what are my values.
Yeah.
Totally disarmed. All the question I like prepared myself for was just
And I want to validate the experience of like, I'm actually this anxious person, because I want listeners to hear that the interview process is a very anxiety-provoking experience for anyone, and it's double, triple the anxiety for someone who, let's say, really struggles with like ongoing anxiety. So I would strongly encourage any organization to re-examine their interview process of like, does it create any unnecessary anxiety and over-performance things, because it doesn't help the candidate and actually doesn't help the organization either. Because when someone's performing, they're not revealing to you their real, do they vibe with you? Do they really want to work in this place and all that? And you kind of want that empathetic honesty so that both sides can win, you know, candidate as well as organization.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we show up as how we are as an organization. So the idea of having them begin with values, for example, is because because of the line of work that we do and our focus area, understanding where you come from and what guides you, your own values, morals and principles, plays a very strong foundational base of which we do the work. Right? And if we as people who are listening in, right, during the interview process, don't understand or be able to see or hear that from that person, then you're missing such a huge component, because that will guide how behaviors will show up within the team. So when we squabble, right, I'm not squabbling with you because I'm just squabbling with you. It's because something is important to me and I feel like you're not taking care of that, right? Or I'm not taking care of what's important to you. So then the values-based conversations or having an understanding of our values would help us understand as a team what can we take care of. during these moments.
Yeah. So we're going to start to land the plane on this first part of the conversation. So we're going to sort of close with the end of the interview process, if you like, which is the how do we say like, okay, we want these people, and how do we say like bye-bye to the ones we don't want in a human way, you know, because that can be very dehumanizing. But yeah, if you're listening and wondering, hey, you never say the second part of the interview process, what? So the second stage is just, it's still a group interview with the individual selected candidate, but that one is a lot more, let's talk about details of the work. You can ask us questions and all that. So that's a lot more like a task-oriented convo, if you like. Yeah, so that's as much as we're going to say about the second stage. Yeah. So let's close off this first part of the conversation with how do we take care of the end of the interview process? The who we say yes to and who must we say no to in a human way.
I always feel quite like, I feel bad. I think because of the way the process was set up, I see more of the human. Do you get what I mean? Because it's no longer about the resume.
Yeah.
The resume is just their work experience, but they brought with them their life experience through the form they filled in, how they showed up, the values they shared with us, the situations that they were maybe concerned about.
Yeah.
Like all that essentially got me to know the individual for who they are.
Yeah.
And to be able to say thank you, but not for us at this season or in this season. It's not the easiest thing to do.
No, it's like a breakup.
Yeah, it's like a I'm sorry, but I have to break up with you. But I don't like, you know, it's like
and I know we're using the word and we don't mean it jokingly. Like when I think back of the team interviews that we have done, like a lot the candidates that you have to say no to, it's not even like because they're bad candidates. If they made it through our like 30-minute interview type form, right? They made the cut because there was something special about them. There was something good about them, but maybe it wasn't the right fit for the right season.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want to really emphasize on. And I'm sure some of our past candidates will probably be listening to this and say, why you never choose me, right? And I really want to say that because I think even when we re-look and we reassess who we are going to choose, we actually do an internal team conversation again. We actually do an internal team conversation again and say, this is who we have. This is what we liked about them. This is what we may be concerned about. What went well for us. What maybe we weren't really sure about. But at the end of the day, what do we want?
Yeah.
And what do we need?
Yeah.
And who do we need?
Yes.
Right? And why is it that it is this person in comparison to the other person? And sometimes the distinctions is really about the season that the organization is in. And perhaps that person has that skill set. Right? Or the mannerism or the way they showed up with already a certain level of ability and language, right? To be able to support that role accordingly. And that's when the choice would be made. But they were all great candidates.
Yeah, no, they were all great.
Like, that's why it was so hard to choose, that we had to have the meeting after the meeting.
Multiple meetings after the meeting.
After the meeting.
Role, right? If you think about it.
Yeah, but those meetings after the meeting on the internal team side, what I really appreciated about it was that it showed me how different we are. No, and it was good. It was good. So there's no what do you call it, like groupthink. No, and I actually appreciated that members of my team didn't agree with my choices. You know, I mean, we all had different choices, and we all had to have a conversation about like the reasons behind the choices that we made. And it was important because we all wanted to own the choice, so that no one can say, "Oh, you hired that person. Okay, fine. You know, like." You take care of them. I reject this candidate. Yeah, we wanted it to be a group like acceptance of this is what we have all sort of like collectively come to. Right at the end of like our debate discussion.
And I think we agreed that where we differed, there was a conversation about what did we differ in, and how do we then take care of that?
Yes.
Right,
How do we
and-
circle back and ask the necessary questions?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even within the internal team to go, okay, actually I can see that maybe you guys agree with this, but this is still the concern I really have. So then how do we take care of those concerns of the team member? And the reality that you're never going to get 100%. We all love this person. In fact, I think if that is 100%, I'll be slightly worried.
Yeah.
Because there might be groupthink.
Yes.
So there have to be an element where there are differences.
Yes.
Right? But the differences is
Yeah.
not to be in conflict, but the difference is to be in understanding of what is it that I am seeing and prioritizing that I feel this candidate may not be able to support this part of the work.
Yeah.
Right? And then when we go back into that conversation is to go, okay, so if we are concerned about this, what then is the development pathway that the team needs to be prepared to support this candidate in?
Yeah.
Since we decide to choose this candidate, or if we decide to choose this candidate.
I think at this point is a good place to put like a ... to be continued. So listeners, if you are still leaning in okay, I want to hear more about this, you can tune in for part 2.